to Help My Daughter Loves Horses. I'm Allie, this is Noah, and we're here to help you enjoy horses in a fun, safe way. So today I thought I would compare a little bit of Western tack to English tack and go through a couple of different English saddles. So this here is an average Western saddle. You'll notice one of the first differences is it's got something called a saddle horn up here. And this is used for actually attaching a lasso. So when you were out roping cattle, you got your rope around a cow, you would actually wrap it around this and use the power of your horse to catch the cow. Another thing, you notice that the stirrups are a little bit different. They're much bigger, and you'll notice kind of just this thicker stirrup leather. They don't have the thin ones like the English saddles do. Another thing is you'll probably notice that the edges of the seat are much higher. And this is because in Western saddles, you really want to keep the cowboy on the horse. So they've got these nice high ends of the saddle to help keep the rider in the saddle. And the last thing is that the girth is a little bit different. So oftentimes you have a cotton girth on a Western saddle. So it's your basic Western saddle. So let's go over and look at these English saddles. Here's my English saddle. This is a dressage saddle. So this is used for riding around an arena, doing only flat work, so no jumping. This is a jumping saddle, also English, used for jumping, going over an obstacle. Now, when you look at these, the first thing you might notice is that the back of the dressage saddle is much higher than the back of the jumping saddle. Much similar to the Western saddle, a dressage saddle really tries to keep the rider in the saddle. Whereas a jumping saddle wants to be as minimal as possible because the goal is to actually get the rider up off the horse's back to allow that horse to stretch over the obstacle or jump. Now, the next thing you might notice is my dressage saddle has a much longer saddle flap. So this area is much longer and straighter. And this is because your seat in a dressage saddle has a very long leg. So when I sit in a dressage saddle, it's up here. I have a very long extended leg, very shallow bend, so not very much bend in my knee. In a jumping saddle, your goal is to really get up off that horse. Your knee is very bent. You're getting up out of the saddle. And so the saddle flap is actually very forward and rather short because your leg is not long in a jumping saddle. You've got a really serious bend in your knee. And so you want the saddle flap to reflect that. You want the saddle flap to have room for your knee to come forward. And then the last thing you'll probably notice is not only is the back part of the saddle lower on a jumping saddle, but the seat is actually flatter. So there's not as much of a drop into the seat and the arch back. This is very flat. And again, that's to give the horse as much room to move under the saddle because he's having to arch his back to clear that jump. Whereas in the dressage saddle, you can have a much deeper seat because you want the rider deep in that saddle and really connecting with the horse. So the last thing that I wanted to show is I also brought an average Western bridle, which I've gotten tangled up in my bridle, and an average English bridle. So this is an average Western bridle. And you'll notice, like I said, there's no noseband. There's no cavesson. So that's the biggest difference often between a Western bridle and an English bridle. The other is that Western bridles often have something attached to the bit called a shank. And see how this shank drops down off the bit? So in my English bridle, the rein attaches directly to the bit. It connects right to where the bit is. When we look at this Western saddle, or Western bridle, you notice that the rein attaches all the way down here, even though the bit itself is up here. And this shank gives more pressure, gives more leverage on the bit and allows you to put less pressure of yourself, but it applies more pressure to the horse. So you don't have to pull as hard to put the same amount of pressure from a Western bit as an English bit. The last thing you'll notice is that these reins are much longer than English reins and they're not attached at the end. So oftentimes with Western reins, they might throw a knot to keep the reins together, or they'll keep them loose because you always just carry them in one hand. You can also use the end of your reins to kind of encourage your horse to mosey along if he's going too slow. So, kind of the basics between some English tack and some Western tack. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching this video. Help My Daughter Loves Horses. Check out our website for more.